All right, so welcome tonight, today, this morning, this evening to all of you who have joined us wherever you are joining us from. My name is Mike. I'm with the ClearAdmit team. For those who are not familiar with ClearAdmit, we are an applicant resource site and applicant community for incoming MBA students as they're going through the application process. You can kind of see around me, I'm surrounded by these dots here of all the different things that we offer. So if you're still in that phase of trying to decide on which school to attend, if you have multiple MBA offers in hand right now and need some assistance, we have this great tool called Decision Wire on our site. Please come by, put your information in, and check the box that says follow comments. I promise you, members from our team, members from our community will give you some advice, where to attend, why, which school might be better for you based on your post-MBA goals, and some of the questions about finance. You may be weighing some different scholarships from different schools and questioning, which one's going to give you the best ROI based on the field that you're going into. And so we can assist with that. But the other main piece of that is, how do you fulfill the rest of those funds? How can you pay the rest of the tuition that's not covered by scholarship? And so what we did is we partnered with Juno here, and we have Pedro here from the Juno team, who's going to tell you everything that you ever would need to know about how to budget, how to pay for school, how to prepare yourself for the next 2 years. So that way you can go into school a little stress-free and with a lot of great knowledge on a lot of really good topics. So Pedro, I'll pass it off to you. This was a great session that we did in January. So another great session, hopefully tonight, for those who came.
Yeah, Mike, thanks again for setting this up and getting us going, and welcome everyone. My name is Pedro Russell. So I'm a head of strategy and business development at Juno, incoming Sloaney. So I'll be attending MIT Sloan this fall, deferred for a year to stay at Juno. And yeah, so I mean, honestly, this presentation was our brainchild, our way of, the company's founded by MBAs, and we service the MBA community. So a lot of the questions you're asking yourself, we asked ourselves during the same process, and have gone and crowdsourced a lot of these answers, in addition to getting some quantitative data to support some of the analysis that we've done for you. So we hope this is all encompassing. There's a lot of different specific components that we can talk about that we are happy to dive deeper in if you have additional questions, or if you want us to hold follow-on sessions. And the last thing I'll note before we jump in is just, please, if there's a question that pops up in your mind, don't be shy about asking. Just reach out through the Q&A or in the chat, and Mike and I will get to it and do our best to answer, or at the very least be able to point you in the right direction for a follow-up. So with that being said, I will begin our screen, sharing my screen, and we're discussing a personal finance for incoming MBAs. So quick disclaimer on the legalese here. We're not an investment advisor, financial analyst, broker, financial advisor, tax advisor, or financial planner. So we're not giving direct investment or financial advice, just merely suggestions on how to navigate the path that we walk through ourselves. And we're going to walk through, so introduction to Juno and what we do. That's going to be a little bit of time, but really I want to focus most of it on the budgeting and the student loan component of it. And then we'll talk about tax and other helpful tips to help you get through the excuse me, the budgeting through the, financing your MBA. So a quick intro on us. If you haven't heard of us, we are Juno, formerly known as Leverage, and our genesis of a company is really started as a fun idea for our co-founders, Christina Keel, to try to negotiate lower rates on their student loans for their incoming class of MBAs. That group ended up growing. With that particular group was 700 members. We now have over 90,000 members, saving an average of $13,000 and 1.6% on your interest rate for student loans. And all of that is completely free, and we'll go into how we accomplish that down the line. But that's just a little bit about us. We're a student loan negotiation company. And we have, depending on the school, we typically average around 35 to 40% of all private student loans originated from us too. So some schools here, hopefully your logos are on there. And even if they're not, we probably do cover a lot of your of your classmates. So on to the fun stuff. So a lot of things that we can talk about within budgeting. The first thing that we really want to highlight is schools do tend to underestimate the median cost of attendance. So just going off the data here, room and utilities, what they're estimating at $1,600 a month for a single room. That's much under what we actually see in Boston. I live in Cambridge, and most people are paying $1,800 to $2,000 a month in rent. So I think that's just important to know is don't just rely on the school's cost of attendance to maintain your budget. Go through each line item and discuss the actual living expenses, primarily room, board, and food. So we have tips and tricks, and it's certainly capable of living within this budget, but it's also people tend to go much higher or much lower as well. So we have a MBA estimate tool that we can help you put together, and so we'll walk through some of the components to that as well right now, right? So the nuance that's important to communicate is like on the median, most people will spend more, but there are ways to save money and live within this budget. So I think the first one we can speak to a few if there's questions, is a lot of people tend to ask about what are like the networking, like food and alcohol events that people take. So the advice that we've gotten is, as you're constructing your budget, look at things on like a weekday basis and on a weekend basis. So on a weekend basis, some spend is going to be unavoidable. So you probably will go in spending more than you've anticipated. Give yourself that financial cushion for all of your weekends as you're thinking about the different trips that you might go on and the people that you are going to want to network and have dinners with. But then during the week, if you're living on a tighter budget, take advantage of things that the school offers. So lots of schools, and especially during recruiting season, lots of companies will have free lunches and other for their recruiting events or other social activities. Clubs will also typically offer food as well. So don't necessarily meal prep for like all 5 days. Just tend to think about the resources that are available to you at the school, and those are kind of ways to save money. So went on a little bit of tangent in terms of savings and budgeting there. We do a whole separate presentation on budgeting and paying for your MBA while you're on a budget. But the high level takeaway from here is, making up the difference is, first calculating your own budget, then taking the school cost of attendance, subtracting the money that you're already getting in scholarships and grants. And the remaining funds is what you might need for student loan to pay for through student loans, your investment account, or your savings. So another element of this that people love to ask us about is the trips. So as it's well known, MBAs go on a lot of trips, and those can really eat at a budget. So what is typical? So if you think about it through the course of 2 years, we'll try to map it out for you. First semester is very intense at a lot of programs. So there's not only academic rigor, but there's also lots of travel involved. There's networking, coffees, dinners. It's probably the most time-intensive portion of the year. And it's also the time when most people go on their biggest trips. So taking a step back, think about what you want your budget to be for all of your trips, and think about it from like a number perspective. So what are the number of trips you want to go on, and then assign that cost. And then there are different types of trips. So like there are the big kind of school class-wide international trips, and then there's like the smaller session, like more personal trips. What we found most people tend to do is the one big trip that if you are to take one, taking it during your first semester, allowing you to kind of not miss out on like the FOMO and still engaging with your classmates while you're still trying to go get to know each other. That's typically the best use of money, is what we've heard from a lot of MBAs. And then as you think about trips and like consolidate, like working through your budget, over time with MBAs, the trips become smaller and more intimate as you start to find your circle. And you really, if you are on a budget and you're trying to, to save money, avoiding the larger trips and just focusing on the more localized ones with your closer group of friends is a good way of keeping things under budget as well. Slide here. So how much money is spent on food and alcohol? So there are two extremes, certainly. I think spending time on one end, it is very easy to spend $50 to $75 a day, if not more, just on food, drinks, casually meeting friends, getting coffee chats. And it's also possible to spend time on the other extreme and really only budget for groceries and live off of, to an extent, like the free meals given at the school, and also through like other programs as well. So there are the extremes. What we see is the biggest thing that you want to avoid here is habit changes. So when you're thinking about constructing a budget, don't think about what you will be doing as an MBA. Think about what you are doing now and how that will translate over to your time, if that makes sense. So if you're looking at your budget and you're saying, okay, like I would be good if I only went out twice a week and did X, Y, Z, but in your heart, okay, look, I'm most likely the type of person that's going to go out 3 or 4 times a week. You need to adjust accordingly. And because you don't want to try to change habits that are already formatted while you're going through classes, while you're networking and meeting people, while you're moving to a new part of the country. It's a lot of undue and added stress. And what we've seen, it's not impossible, but a lot of people tend to fall back on habits that they've formed. I see a question here. Where can we access the budgeting webinar? So we can send that out in an email. Like, correct me if I'm wrong, but we have the access to the email list here. And we'll schedule a time specifically to do like a panelist on tips and tricks for the budgeting piece. I can also speak to that towards the end of this call as well. Mm-hmm. See another question here. For the expenses, is there on top of the school's cost of attendance? Yes. Okay, this is a great question here. So for the expenses I mentioned, the school gives you a budget, but it's very important to do your own. So if we go here and we look at like living expenses at, let's say they're $16,000 or $1,770 a month, take that $1,770 and build your own. So how much, and do it on a day basis, right? So like, how much are you going to spend on an average day, right? Are you going to be the type of person that gets Sweet Green 4 days a week? Because if you are, give yourself a Sweet Green budget. That's $18 a day, or however much Sweet Green costs. Are you going to go out 3 times a week? Okay, that's going to be $70 right there, right? So trips is another thing. It's not explicitly stated in like the school's cost of attendance. So I think that's the most important thing to note here is like, think about the type of trips you want to go on. Type being, what are the trips that can fit most within your budget, right? So there's a difference between going on a trip from Boston to Vermont for a weekend in a house with a couple of friends versus going on a trek to the World Cup that's going to already have a sticker price of maybe a couple $1,000s, but you're going to be going to parties, you're going to be eating dinner, You're going to be doing tours and treks within that are not explicitly stated in the cost of attendance of the trip, but are things that you're going to want to do to make yourself like actually enjoy the trip. And advice that we get is, don't go on trips that you wouldn't feel comfortable spending the money that's like needed to fully enjoy yourself, because you're only going to build resentment towards yourself and towards others for not being able to participate in all the activities that other people are. So great question. Okay, some more questions. Oh, and the final question, some people spend $350K over 2 years. That is a bit of an outlier. I mean, it really does depend on where you're coming from. And I don't want people to think that it's like it's impossible to live. Like it's actually very, very doable. I've had a friend who went into business school with $3,000 and was able to have an amazing time. And we can talk about that kind of during the Q&A portion as well. Some other questions here. If student loans can only be obtained for the certified cost of attendance, how do you finance the travel, networking, and alcohol? Let's talk about that in a second. The budget webinar, yep, Mike's going to we'll send that out in the email following the event. So yeah, let's talk about filling the gap. So we talked about this. Filling the gap using student loans. Okay, so real quick to go over the student loan process. It typically occurs kind of once per year in the summer, where you determine how much you want to borrow, where you want to borrow it from. Adjusting your loan amount, you can apply for a new loan or prepay your existing one. And we typically see it being easier to just do the whole process during the summer before you have to actually go to school. There's another thing I will note: interest rates are rapidly rising. So at Juno, we do have a skip the rate hike campaign where we can still lock in your interest rates from this past year before you go to school, which honestly is could save you the tens of thousands of dollars if you look at a rate going up from like 5 to 6.5% in a single year. And we're tracking the 10-year treasury, and it gives us a strong indication that that's the case. So that was quick on the loan process. I'm going to skip through DACA right now. It doesn't seem like we're getting a lot of questions there. We do a separate session on DACA. If you have individual questions, please reach out. This is what we have right now. It's the same as we have for international students, is a 6.5% fixed rate on a 10-year repayment plan. We are working on a separate deal, with details to be shared later. So cost of attendance minus scholarships. I know this is kind of the question burning at everyone, right? So schools, as you mentioned, public cost of attendance. They will then also, on a lot of cases, issue the scholarships and fellowships. So what we have here is, if you take, for example, a school with $120,000 cost of attendance, if you receive, let's say you receive a $40,000 scholarship for that specific year, that means you have $80,000 left over, which you can borrow. Now, if there's a gap between your budget and your the budget that you run and the cost of attendance, what are some things you can do? So there are 3 things that I want to talk about. The first is increasing income. So there's actually a few easy ways to make money. I think the one that it's a hack that not a lot of people learn about until maybe halfway through their first year or into their second year is a lot of MBAs do part-time contract work for their ex-employer. And that work can range from things like assisting with recruiting or interviewing new hires to more in-depth projects like working on a specific product launch or advertising marketing campaign while they're in school. So it's quite easy to factor in maybe 10 hours a week for your MBA. And I think the advice that we give is like, reach out to your employer if you have a good relationship with them or a past employer, and let them know your interest in continuing to do some contract work on the side. And a lot of people have found that they've been able to budget for that after having that conversation. The other option is teaching assistant or art dorm associate positions. So we call them RAs at MIT. I don't know if they're the same everywhere, probably are. TA positions, you're eligible after your first semester, at least at MIT. Our recommendation is take a class that TA class that you can get a lot out of for not as much effort into it. So there's a lot of TA positions that will pay up to 20 hours. I don't know a single TA position at MIT that actually will take 20 hours worth of work. A lot of it is between 4 and 5. So definitely look into that. RA positions, similar to TA, are all available to grad students, but you have to put in the work to reach out and network your way within the school to identify these opportunities. So that's kind of like raising income. The other thing we see is like being a bit more creative with your budget. So sometimes there's like stocks or rainy day fund that people can allocate and pay for that kind of with savings or their investment accounts. There are other options like, reallocating different portions of your budget and factoring in leadership positions to allow you to like pursue activities that you would not have pursued, that you'd be pursuing anyways. So for example, if you're an avid golfer, I know this is kind of a silly example, but it's actually true in my case. Being the president of the golf club allows you to, go to the school for funds to help you literally pay to go golfing, and inviting your friends or inviting people from other backgrounds and that aren't as familiar with golf, and holding those events allows you to kind of do the thing that you enjoy doing without actually having to pay for it. You get the money supported from the school. So the hack is get involved, really, and this applies to everything: education club, finance, fintech. If you're recruiting for banking, join the IB club, the private equity club. Get money to travel to these events. If you are a huge foodie and there's not a foodie club, start your own, or sponsored treks to different sponsored treks to different places. So a few questions here now are coming up. Is the scholarship that is subtracted scholarships from FAFSA or the school, or both? So FAFSA is, yes. So what you're allowed to borrow is the total cost of attendance subtracted by the total amount of aid that you were given. So if you are receiving aid from FAFSA, and then that is money that you're not eligible to borrow. How do you budget for club fees, etc.? This is a great question. And I will say it does depend school by school. I would give you the advice that we hear is pick the clubs that you're going to get the most value out of. Sloaney's tendencies are MIT business school students' tendencies is to try to do everything at once. There's a few things that people have said you will waste money on. One is meal prepping. So don't just try to do everything at once on Sunday, because you will end up throwing out half of that food anyways. There's definitely there's opportunities to eat at school. There's dinners that pop up. You'll be too tired, etc. The other thing is club fees. So a lot of people just join a bunch of clubs in the fall, and then don't end up doing anything at most of them because you just don't have the time. Most people have time, and if you are budget constrained, focus on 1 or 2 clubs that you can actively participate in and get a lot of engagement out of, because those clubs are resources that the school provides that you can actually pull funds from to help support your MBA experience. So that's what I would suggest. I would suggest maybe just reaching out to the 2 clubs that you're interested in on and seeing what those fees are, leaving the rest off for now, and then seeing what you can do to extract the most value from those clubs while your time there. Is it possible to borrow the full cost of attendance? It is, again, minus the amount of aid that you receive either from the school or from FAFSA. Let's see. Oh, there's another interesting question here. I just moved on. Is it true that you should apply for loans before you quit your job? That's a great question. The school's primary, or an underwriter's primary borrowing criteria is going to be your debt to income ratio. So I honestly don't think it makes that much of a difference if you quit your job or not, because income is not really point in time. It is kind of backwards looking. So like, as long as you're able to point to the job that you did have and like the checks that were coming in, it shouldn't impact you too much. I can hear, the caveats already, that, sometimes, it depends on like the timing of when you quit your job. And so if you're purely indexing on debt to income, you are going to be in a safer place if you apply for loans while you still have your job. Yes. What is the usual contract structure for part-time work or contract for an ex-employer? That is super dependent on your employer and you and the amount of time that you have, and honestly, the relationship that you have with that employer. I'll give you 2 examples of what I know. I know of a ex-consultant who remained at his firm working on a project on a contract basis for a specified amount of hours. The amount of work he actually did varied. So he was on contract for 20 hours per week on a consulting project with a specific client. In that case, he was given separate tasks from like the consulting partner on the job, but the actual amount of time that he was worked and how he was being evaluated was purely on a deliverables basis, not on a hourly basis. So you are able to like leverage and arbitrage that. I had another person who was paid similarly on a contract basis on an hourly rate, but she was conducting interviews and screening for new hires for her old position. So she was going and basically managing the recruiting process for her old role, and they were paying her for that. Is aid outside of school, like fellowships, not subtracted from cost of attendance? Correct. So like, I mean, any aid that is paid directly to you as an individual is not calculated. Anything that goes through the school will be subtracted from your cost of attendance. All right. Let's keep going. So I know at this point we hear a lot of things like, what is the, is there, it's just a big deal. Should I even go? It's not uncommon for MBAs to graduate with, debt of 120K or more. The average percent of borrowers falls between that like 50 and 90K per year. So you are not alone. So private loans and credit cards. Okay, yes, great question from Daniel. Credit cards is something that we talk about a little later, but I can address that now. It is, so private loans, first and foremost, we don't recommend unless you're able to get some sort of secured line of credit at a decent interest rate. A lot of private loans go up beyond like 12-13%. And the amount of time that they compound, which is sometimes 2 years, is prohibitively expensive, we feel like, and just puts people into a tough position. So try to avoid private loans if you can. The caveat being, so like, if you're able to pay off that loan under 2 years, or through like an internship, or like selling some stock, or other like cash influx, that might be a situational, like situation specific thing for you, that you could do, right? So yeah, so what I mean by secure loan, yes, if you're able to like pull out equity from like a home or some other investment, borrowing against your investments at a lower rate, those type of strategies we've seen in the past. The important thing to index on, because all the people here, your familiarity with finance may vary. The most important thing that we like to look at is interest rate. So like, what is your cost of the money that you are borrowing? And what is the term in which you need to pay it back? So if you get yourself a good rate, and you're comfortable with the decision that you're making, whether to put like, some an asset that you have, which again, like, it's situational, depends on a lot of different factors for each individual, then yes, absolutely go for a HELOC, or some other secured loan versus a personal loan. Credit cards, we'll talk in tips and tricks, but unless the key here is, unless you're not paying any interest on that, and though there's a lot of cards that do have that, like no interest for like 12 or 24 months, don't pay for your MBA on a credit card. At least don't plan to do that for the 2 years. Maybe there's like a 3-month span that you want to go on a really good trip, and like, yeah, sure, like throw $5,000 on a credit card because your signing bonus of 25K is going to come in like 3 months. Fine, whatever. Don't take out $60,000 in credit card debt and have like a 24% APR on that, for sure. And yeah, and just know that you're not alone. I think another question we received: should you sell stocks to pay for business school? This is a heavy question. If you're seeing in the marketplace that your stocks are returning a rate that is higher than the amount that you're going to borrow, then it's a more effective use of your money to keep that money invested and to then borrow, because the opportunity cost of taking that money out, paying the tax for the realized gain, and then putting that money into an expense versus letting it continue to grow and compound, is going to be greater than what it would cost for you to borrow that money. That being said, interest rates are crazy, that they're 7 or 8%. The stock market doesn't look like it's going to return much. Maybe you can sell at a loss and harvest some losses. I think this is the point in time where I would talk to a specific financial advisor for your situation. Our personal feelings is like, maximize the amount of money that you're able to utilize in this 2-year period, because after that, you're going to be returned to the workforce. Your salary is going to be much larger than it was before. Using a Roth, that is also later on in the presentation, also not recommended, just because of kind of like the tax implications of that, and like the compounding effects of investing long term. That's really not what a Roth is supposed to be used for. A 529 is. So I'll talk about that in a second. But if you're going to use an investment, a retirement, or like a tax advantage savings account or investment account, a 529 makes a lot more sense. So let's talk about loan options. So once you get to the point where you need to fund that, and if you do think about taking out student loans, there are 3 options that you can borrow. We have federal unsubsidized, we have the federal plus loans, and then your private student loans. So on the federal unsubsidized loans, I think they're a great option. They come with pros and cons, just kind of like private loans do or plus loans do. So when you look at the federal unsubsidized, the first thing to note is 2 things. 1, there's a cap on the amount that you can borrow. 2, your interest rate is going to be fixed, and it will likely be higher this year than it was last. I think we're not sure, but we're going to see rates probably higher than like 6.5, maybe even 7%. And it does come with an origination fee. So origination fee basically means what is the cost to you, a one-time payment in order to be able to borrow that money. So a 1.08% origination fee means that you have to pay a 1% fee on the $20,000 that you borrow. So in that case, that would be about $200. A question here, can you finance the origination fees? Yes, I believe so. That's actually a question I'd like to get back to you on. I'm not 100% sure. And then what should we do about company sponsored Ross? Let it ride or convert. There's actually a slide. We don't actually feel one way or another on that, but we'll talk about that specifically. So Daniel, I will get back to you on financing the origination fees because I do not have that answer readily available. Moving past the unsubsidized loans to the Fed plus loans, that you can borrow up to the cost of attendance. The benefits that you get from borrowing more is that the trade-off, you're going to pay more in interest rates. So the Fed plus loans are higher cost of capital than the unsubsidized, comes with a higher origination fee. So that 1.8% actually now turns to 4.28% for the Fed plus loans. Excuse me. And with the additional benefits to both being there's student loan forgiveness or income driven repayment, which does come into play if you end up going into nonprofit VC or other sectors that you might not be getting as much, making as much money in your first few years post business school. So once you evaluate your federal loan options, we do encourage you to join Juno and see what your rates and how they are and how they compare to the public sector loans. Private student loans also allow you to borrow up to the cost of attendance. They are less expensive, only definitely like 100% less expensive from an origination fee perspective where you don't pay one. Interest rates will vary depending on the perceived creditworthiness of the borrower by the lender. There's also a big thing that you should know on the additional benefits offered in that there is no student loan forgiveness or income-driven repayment for private student loans. That means that in a forbearance situation, or if you end up going into the private sector and you need to pay off your loans slower, your options are more limited, and the forgiveness option is really doesn't exist. Those loans will continue to be on you to pay back even through bankruptcy, or in the case of a death or absenteeism to a cosigner if the cosigner is cosigning the loan. Terrence, what does Juno offer for international students? So our international deal, we do have a completely separate webinar on that, which we can also share afterwards. A quick note on that is that our international loans are similar or the exact same as they would be for DACA, in which we have a deal with Empower right now at currently paying at 6.5% fixed with a 10-year repayment. With interest only while you're at school. Excellent. Sorry, my voice is getting a little raspy. I'll try to power through here. So why should you select federal versus why should you select private? So reasons to select federal loans. So I guess at the end, again, this does depend really on the individual borrower. Like we are a student loan aggregator. We do make money off student loans, to be quite frank, off private ones. That being said, not everyone is the right person for a private student loan. So we wouldn't want you to take out a private student loan without understanding the potential drawbacks and benefits of it. So if you are pursuing a career that may make you eligible for public service loan forgiveness. Or you think that you're going to go and start your own business or have another industry where your income isn't going to be super high right out of business school. Federal loans offer much more flexibility for you in terms of paying the loan off than a private student loan would. So just make note of that. If you are looking to optimize for the cost of the loan, check your rate, see what's more affordable if it's through a private loan than a public loan, and you don't see your payoff term being inhibited by the income that you're drawing, then a private loan is a good avenue for you. I will note, and we'll talk about this later on, that Juno has done a really great job here in terms of working on lenders to lower rates for our cohort. So we have offered low rate guarantees in the past, where, you know, if you have a lower interest rate that you find somewhere else, Juno our lenders will match that loan for you. So those are like programs that we've run in the past and continue to run, and we'll have more details on later on. By and large, 95 to 99% of loans in the private space are going to be like the lowest for MBAs if you go through Juno. And I mean, well, you can see for yourself, honestly. That's not a hard sell on my part. It's just part of the presentation that we talked through. Let's see. When you're doing rate shopping, does your credit score suffer for each credit pull as is seen, or as one similar to when shopping for a mortgage? Yeah, hard credit pulls stay, regardless of whether it's for a mortgage or a student loan, do stay on your record. I will say, I know for a fact that credit score is not the most important thing that a lender will look at. They will really index heavily on your debt to income ratio. So if there's anything that you can do to clean your debt from kind of your credit profile before taking out the loan, those are things that benefit you in your ability to take out and get a good rate on your interest. Some other questions here. International student loan webinar. Okay, cool. Totally would love to do that. We'll bring on our head of international to talk to that as well, and then also have some panelists who took out loans through Juno and who didn't take out through Juno on that side. If you plan on going into entrepreneurship post MBA, do you know if federal loans have any repayment forbearance options? So forbearance is a tricky one. It's handled on an individual level, where you submit a request to apply for forbearance for an extenuating circumstance. I'm not sure if entrepreneurship qualifies. However, for entrepreneurship, going through an income-driven repayment plan is probably the best option. If you can show that the salary that you're drawing is X amount, they will ask for repayment based on that specified income level that you are generating. International loans. Are previous student loans considered in the debt to income ratio? Yes, previous student loans, all debt that's on your credit report is included in your debt to income ratio, although not all debt is treated equally. So personal loans, credit card debt, treated more stringently than student loans and mortgages as well. So we've gotten some questions on whether if a student takes out a mortgage, will it impact your interest rate? The answer is likely yes. I mean, we can't say for certain, we're not with the lender, but the answer is likely yes. But with mortgages, it's a different type of debt that's more secured, and so it's viewed differently than an unsecured personal loan or a credit card debt. What is a good debt income ratio that underwriters view favorably? I don't know. And that differs quite literally from lender to lender. Um, I will say that one of the reasons that we have such good rates is because just our cohort of MBA applicants is viewed more favorably from an underwriting perspective. So our main partner has less stringent debt to income ratios than other underwriters at competing lenders do. As for what that like, I mean, it's a trade secret. We can go and try and. That's actually a great question. I would love to learn more about that. But as of right now, the only persons that would know that would be somebody that directly did the underwriting and had access to the rate tables. So the way it works is you are assigned, like there's like 20 different points of reference that an underwriter uses to determine your credit worthiness. And based on how you score and the weightings on that on the rubric, you are placed on a certain rate table, which will assign you your specific interest rate. Yeah. So all that to say, coming back to this, TLDR, know that federal loans give you more flexibility, know that they are a little bit more expensive, know that private loans are less expensive, but they come with higher standards for repayment. Know that Juno is, by and large, the best place to go for private student loans. And the reason for that is simple. It's just we work on a volume basis. So at you as an individual, and this goes to Daniel's question on like, does applying for a loan impact your credit score? Yes, absolutely. And what it does is create an artificial barrier towards commoditization of student loans. Commoditization means like wheat or corn, right? Corn is the same in one can as from another. It's a commodity. It's the same thing. The only way to differentiate is by price. Student loans should be like that, but because there's different borrowing criteria, and then there's like artificial barriers like credit scores that actually will remove the commoditization of a student loan. So as an individual, you don't have a lot of bargaining power because they know that you're not going to go to 4 or 5 different places to check for a loan. After Juno, so if you join like our free community, what you see is, we are able to do that work for you. We can say, okay, we have 100 people or 1,000 people or 90,000 people in our case now that are applying for student loans. What's the best deal that you can give us? And we have a flat rate that we charge each lender, and we say the lender that can give us the best deal is the lender we will go to. That way we are not biased towards one specific lender. That lender is in the past has been Earnest, so we work pretty much exclusively with Earnest in the MBA space. Likely to work with them again, and it's because we get to send all of our volume to them, they're able to give us that discount. How much does having a cosigner positively impact the borrowing rate you get? It impacts it a lot, especially on the international side, because if you have a US cosigner, you're able to qualify for US rates, and the cosigner's credit worthiness is taken into account and is underwritten alongside yours. So I don't have a specific number for you, but I will say that like in pretty much all cases, having a cosigner will lower the amount of interest that you will have to pay. So this is kind of what I was alluding to earlier. We have a low student loan rate guarantee. So if you do go out and you find a lower rate than us, Juno, through our lending partner, will match that and give you cash. So we really are very transparent about this. Like, we want you to save the most money, and because that allows us to put pressure on our lenders to lower the rates, which ultimately is how our business model works. So yeah, again, this is not like, the purpose of this presentation isn't to pitch you on Juno, but to be completely honest, um, it just makes sense to sign up for Juno, to get a rate through us, and then rate shop, because you're going to be able to have more leverage and bargaining power to do so. Yeah. All right. Tax tips. So we talked about 401ks, and there's another slide on 401ks here, but this is kind of my favorite one. So if you have a 529 plan, or you can actually open a 529 plan now, you can save money on state taxes by paying for qualified expenses through your 529. Qualified expenses will be anything listed on that cost of attendance sheet. So outside of the like living expenses, which like is a little bit blanket. Excuse me, I am coming down with a little bit of something, so please bear with me. Yeah, so check state by state, because it will things will be different, and this only applies to state tax and not federal. But room and board, that's money that's rent. Really, you can pay this out of a 529, and then book supplies, tuition, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. Oh, the last thing to note is you cannot double dip this with a lifetime earning credit, which is something that you would apply for through your taxes. Options to manage your 401k. So there's an earlier question on like rollovers. We see both. Like, the question was, you let it ride, or do you typically convert to a Roth? That is different than this question, but it's the next one. So let's just talk about how to manage a 401k. The personal opinion of our founder is, when you roll it over to your own IRA, you get more access to investment choices and more flexibility, typically, or maybe than you would, depending on your employer plan, and it gets them a higher tier at their bank. There is a point on rollovers and Roth conversions. So the question was, do you typically convert their 401ks to a Roth? I don't know if the answer is typical, but there's definitely an opportunity to do so. So a Roth is effectively like, you pay tax on a Roth right when you put the money into the investment account, whereas a 401k is you pay the taxes after you at the end of the investment period. So why this matters is because your tax rate is dependent on your income. So what you would have to pay to convert the 401k to a Roth, that tax will depend on how much money you're making in that fiscal year. And so if you do your conversion in a year where you're really not making as much money as you were in the past or will be in the future, that's actually a great time to consider converting to a Roth, because let's say you're making $150,000 a year, you go down to making $30,000, your tax bracket goes from that 150k percentile down to the 30k percentile, and that saves you a ton of money, which then compounds over the long term. Something that you will want to note is that it will require cash out of your pocket to pay for that tax. So make sure that you have the money to be able to pay for the taxes to convert from a 401k to a Roth. And I know this can be a little bit complex, so I will pause for questions if anyone has some at this time. Excellent. Other tips, student discounts everywhere. I think we do a separate session on like discounts and like budgeting for your MBA where we cover tips heavily. I will say the two things that you can really do to maximize like just like side hustle is the credit card game. So taking out some card like a Chase Sapphire Preferred or Reserve or Amex Platinum or Gold allows you to capture like the points, which can be used to travel, and then transferring that balance to a no interest credit card for 18 or 12 or 18 months basically allows you to double dip and use the points without actually having to pay any interest on the purchases that you've made to achieve that minimum balance. And then the last tip, I think, is just honestly having a good time. Like a lot of people leave these sessions feeling like a little disheartened, but honestly, like borrowing money is a part of it. The part that people don't really talk about or know about until they're at school is just like how much more money you're going to make or can make, and the opportunities that you will have going through the experiences that you're going through. So shifting the mentality from just like a budget mindset and a cost mindset to like, how do I use my investment in business school most effectively and maximize the return? This is a point in your life where if you look at your life like a P&L, like an income statement, focusing not on like cost reduction, but on like top line, like income growth, is one of the few places in life where you really are able to just to execute on that in orders of magnitude. So I know we're past time here. If there are questions I didn't get to, I think there's one here: for a student loan for an MBA in the UK, would co-signer for the US lower my interest rates? I would say, Tanu, please reach out to me separately. I'll find your email and I'll speak with you, because I'm not sure if you're asking about borrowing a loan. I'm not sure if LBS is on like the list of approved borrowers for our domestic loan. So I'll check with you and get back to you on that. For everyone else, thank you so much. It's been a fantastic conversation. Oh, I do see questions still coming in. I'm sorry. Yeah, so Manal, you're asking on like the friend who's still able to enjoy the MBA. We're having a separate session on that. So I'm literally inviting her to speak, and we'll send that invite out. So that's paying for an MBA on a tighter budget. And that's going to be a whole 30 to 45-minute conversation. We're going to have panelists from different schools talking about their experiences. And I think it's going to be a little bit more interactive than this, where it's just one person giving you advice. And so I think there's more value there. So please stay tuned, guys. Thank you so much. And I hope that was a productive hour of your time.